The wind howled across the endless plains of the frontier as winter slowly crept closer, bringing with it a cold that could break even the strongest men. On the edge of the dusty valley stood a small wooden cabin, weathered by storms and years of loneliness. Inside that cabin lived Clara Whitmore, a widow who had learned to survive in a land that rarely showed mercy. Her husband had died 2 years earlier during a brutal cattle raid, leaving her alone with nothing but memories, a few acres of struggling land, and the constant whisper of the wind through broken fence posts. Most nights, Clara would sit by the fireplace, staring into the flames as if they could somehow bring warmth back into her empty life. But the truth was, the frontier was not kind to lonely souls, especially not to a woman trying to protect a ranch by herself. The townspeople spoke about her with a mixture of pity and respect. Clara was strong, stronger than most expected, but strength could not silence the quiet ache of solitude. Days blurred into nights as she worked the land, mended fences, and fought against the harshness of the wilderness. Yet deep down, she knew something was missing. Not just help with the ranch, but a presence. Someone who could stand beside her when the storms came. One evening, as the sky burned orange beneath the setting sun, Clara noticed something unusual near the riverbank. A large figure moved slowly through the tall grass, powerful and silent like a shadow. At first she froze, her heart racing. Bandits were common in this region, and strangers rarely meant safety. She reached for the old rifle resting by the door and stepped outside cautiously. The figure emerged from the fading light, towering taller than any man she had ever seen, broad-shouldered and strong like a mountain carved from stone. The stranger wore the markings of an Apache warrior. His presence carried both danger and calm at the same time. His dark eyes studied the cabin, the fields, and finally settled on Clara. For a moment neither spoke. Clara tightened her grip on the rifle. "State your business," she said firmly, refusing to let fear show in her voice. The giant Apache raised one hand slowly, not as a threat but as a gesture of peace. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and steady, like distant thunder. "I mean no harm," he said. "I followed the river for shelter. Winter comes soon." Clara studied him carefully. Despite his intimidating size, there was something in his expression that didn't feel hostile. "Something honest. You can stay in the barn for the night," she replied cautiously. "But that's all." The warrior nodded respectfully. "My name is Dakota." Clara hesitated before answering. "Clara." That night the wind grew fierce, rattling the cabin walls as the first hints of winter crept across the valley. Clara tried to sleep, but something about the stranger outside kept her mind restless. Finally, curiosity pushed her to the window. Through the dim moonlight, she saw Dakota sitting near the barn, calmly repairing a broken piece of fence as if he belonged there. Over the next few days, Dakota did something Clara never expected. He stayed, but not as a burden. Each morning she woke to find chores already done, firewood stacked neatly, fences repaired. The horses calmed. The ranch slowly began to look alive again. At first, Clara resisted his help, suspicious of any stranger's kindness. But Dakota never asked for anything in return. He simply worked quietly and tirelessly. One afternoon, while they repaired the main gate together, Clara finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. "Why are you really here?" Dakota paused, leaning on the wooden post as he looked toward the distant mountains. "My people once traveled this land," he said softly. "But war took much from us. Now I walk alone." His words carried a weight Clara understood all too well. "I know something about that," she admitted. From that day forward, a quiet understanding grew between them. They shared meals, stories, and long evenings by the fire. The loneliness that once filled the cabin slowly began to fade. Dakota was unlike any man Clara had ever known. Despite his powerful frame and warrior spirit, he carried a surprising gentleness. He listened when she spoke. He respected her strength instead of trying to control it. One night, as the first snowflakes of the season drifted softly from the sky, they stood together outside the cabin, watching the land turn white. Clara pulled her coat tighter. "Winter's coming fast," she murmured. Dakota looked down at her with a calm certainty that made her heart skip. "Winter does not frighten me," he said, "but loneliness does." Clara looked up at him, surprised by his honesty. For a long moment the wind carried silence between them. Then Dakota spoke again, his voice steady but filled with quiet determination. "By winter's end," he said slowly, "you will not stand alone anymore. I will protect this land. And you." Clara felt something stir inside her chest, something she hadn't felt since before her husband died: hope. Over the following weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. They faced storms together, worked the land side by side, and learned to trust one another in ways neither expected. Dakota's presence transformed the ranch. Where there had once been silence, there was now laughter. Where there had been despair, there was now purpose. One evening by the fire, Clara looked at him thoughtfully. "You didn't have to stay," she said. Dakota met her gaze. "I stayed because this place, and you, needed someone who would not leave." Clara smiled softly, realizing that for the first time in years, she no longer felt like the lonely widow the town once pitied. She felt strong again. As winter settled across the valley, the cabin glowed warmly against the snow-covered plains, a symbol of two lonely lives finding strength in each other. And though neither of them could predict what the future would bring, one truth had already become clear. Sometimes destiny arrives quietly, in the form of a stranger who chooses to stay. If you enjoyed this powerful frontier romance story, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable Wild West tales, legendary cowboys, fearless warriors, and emotional frontier love stories. Your support helps bring more incredible stories like this to life.